And Dan Larrabee says, or asks, extraterrestrials? We'll call that a hyphenated word. Some people write it as one, but I'll count it extraterrestrials, question mark. My answer, Dan, is yes, but almost certainly not here. We had a conversation not too long ago with some friends outside about UFOs and did I believe in them. And of course, you have to preface this by saying, do I believe that there are objects in the sky that are unidentified? Absolutely. Do I believe they're flying saucers from another civilization? Absolutely not. It's a very, 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 very implausible explanation, and it basically, in my opinion, it's not just Occam's razor. I don't believe in UFOs as alien visitations because of the fact that every single one of these pictures is blurry, and then, oh, that was a fake. Yeah, okay, well, that one was a fake, but these aren't. Well, that one was a fake too. Okay, but what about these? How come it's always something the size of a dinner plate being seen behind trees? How come everything's blurry? How come everything's out of focus? How come it's a light that's moving and then changes its motion? Okay, some of this stuff is interesting, and I don't know if all of it's explainable just yet, but this business about flying saucers, don't believe it. I cannot rule it out the way that I can rule out the Loch Ness Monster. I can rule out the Loch Ness Monster. I can just say UFOs as an extraterrestrial intelligence, extremely unlikely. The Loch Ness Monster, by the way, is ruled out because people will say that, well, what is it? And they'll say, it's a plesiosaur. It's a what? It's the last surviving dinosaur that lived in the water, and it's trapped in Loch Ness, and it's been breeding down there, and they're just the last population of plesiosaurs. Okay, plesiosaur is an air breather, right? Yes. Like, it's a reptile, has to come up to breathe air? Yes. Then there's nothing in Loch Ness. There is no Loch Ness Monster. What? How can you say that? Because you come up with a picture or a ripple or a bump, a ripple. Every 7 years, there's a ripple. If it's an air-breathing plesiosaur, it's going to be at the surface 8 times an hour. We'll have hundreds of thousands of pictures of it right up close with its teeth, right there. Because if it has to come up to breathe, then we'll see it all the time. There are no hidden caves at the bottom of Loch Ness. And even more to the point, and this is a bit of a problem, is that there's no fish in Loch Ness. Nothing of any size. It is an extremely sterile lake. There are some fish there, obviously, but there's no schools of fish. There's nothing like the biomass necessary to feed something like this. The Loch Ness Monster does not exist. But UFOs, I'm virtually confident, don't exist as alien vehicles. But I can't rule it out. I can just talk to you about how unlikely it is. And it is extremely unlikely that creatures that can travel interstellar distances, travel 25, 30, 50, 100 light years, and then they suddenly arrive here, and it's like, oops, we stabbed a cow, or oops, we flew into a hill. Oh, I hate it when that happens. We flew our extraterrestrial vehicle into a mountain in Roswell, North Carolina, and we returned debris that's about the size of a Jiffy Pop pan, and this is the best evidence we have? No. Nope. I don't believe it. However, a better part of your question, Dan, I think, is that's not what you asked. You didn't ask UFOs, you said extraterrestrials. What's interesting about that is there is no question in my mind, just the mathematical argument that the universe is populated with life. There's no question in my mind that virtually every planet, virtually every star system we see out there is showing signs of planets, and we are seeing infinitely more planetary systems than we ever suspected. We thought planetary systems might be somewhat rare. We're finding them everywhere. To our utter amazement, however, I'm a guy who wrote the first software I ever used, the first program I ever wrote was a program that generated solar systems, and I wrote it because I was bored in the summer at the University of Florida, wrote it in BASIC, and by the time I was done, I had 60,000 lines of code, and you hit a button, and it would say, type K star, this radius, this diameter, this luminosity, this solar mass, planet 1 at this radius, in this orbital period, this inclination, this albedo, this temperature, this, and just create solar systems for a role-playing game I used to play called Traveler. So I understand all this, and we thought that solar systems would look like ours. Small planets up close, the terrestrial planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars. Rocky, small, close to the sun because the solar wind blew the lighter elements out into the outer solar system. And you get to the outer solar system, and you have the gas giant planets, the Jovian planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And these planets are big because they can be gaseous because they're not so close to the radiation pressure. That's why they can retain their hydrogen. Got it. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, we start seeing solar systems coming in, and then we find planets the size that are Jupiter or 10 Jupiters, and they're orbiting at the distance of Mercury or something like that. It just doesn't make any sense. But there it is. So we're finding planets everywhere. I would not be surprised if we found life on, evidence of life on Mars, extinct life, or maybe even existing life, but be surprised if we didn't find extinct life on Mars because there was liquid water there, a lot of it. I think we're likely to find evidence of life under the oceans in Europa, under the ice. We might find life on Titan. We might find life in the clouds of the Jovian planets, might find life in the atmosphere of Jupiter. I wouldn't be surprised at any of this. I am certain we'll find life if we find other planets within the habitable zone of other stars, and we'll define the habitable zone of a star as a place where liquid water can exist, which means that for most of the year there has to be large quantities of water in liquid form. It has to be warm enough so that the water's not frozen, and it has to be cool enough so that the water's not evaporated into water vapor. And when you find that, you're going to find life. I have no doubt whatsoever. But what's interesting is, Dan, is that we thought that given the number of planets and life that we're seeing as the base of the pyramid is much wider. And so you go from life, microbes, then be less likely to have organized life, and even less likely to have intelligent life, and even less likely to have intelligent life with a technological civilization, and even less likely to find a technological civilization that had the radio power to communicate. And what we're finding is the pyramid is much wider than we originally thought, that there's a lot more life out there than we suspected. And yet, we've done that was a bit of a Shatner moment, and yet we've found next to nothing. Nothing, in fact. We've been listening. Used to be, when the search for extraterrestrial intelligence started, you had to take a radio telescope, point it at the sky, and you had to monitor one frequency or two, and you're just barely able to get this stuff. Then the computer revolution happened, and then they're able to sample 10,000 frequencies at the same time. And we've been doing this now for 15, 20 years, looking for signals out in space, and there isn't any. That's interesting. It turns out, I think, that that life, I think, will be everywhere, but I think civilization, intelligent life, higher forms of life are going to be much rarer than we thought, and I think civilization is going to be even rarer. And I used to wonder why. I don't wonder why anymore. The reason that we're here, my friends, is because of the moon. The moon. The moon is a fluke. The Earth's moon was the product of the original Earth, Earth Mark I, which was hit by an object about the size of Mars. The two planets fused together, and the initial core of Earth 1, the initial core of Earth 1, was knocked out of the Earth and became the moon. Now, the Earth-Moon system is unique. It's a double planet. The Pluto system is a multiple planet where the primary and the secondary are about the same size. But Earth and Moon are serious, large things. And I saw a documentary on Discovery, back when Discovery was a science channel, 10, 15 years ago. I think it was called What We Would Do Without the Moon, or What We Owe the Moon, or something like this. And basically what the moon does is the moon stabilizes the rotation of the planet, which is inclined to want to flip over time. And if it flips, then you go through centuries, if not millennia, where the poles are pointing towards the sun, so there's a whole northern hemisphere that just fries and the southern hemisphere just freezes like Uranus does. And that's the end of intelligent life and civilization if you have thousands of years of hard, cold extremes like that. And the moon especially is a profoundly useful shield. All you have to do is look at the moon through a telescope to see the number of craters on the moon. Now, the Earth has had a lot of craters too. On the case of the Earth's weather system and atmosphere has eroded away a lot of those craters. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at the moon through a telescope, you can pretty much rest assured that most every one of those craters was coming our way. And when they ran simulations on the moon, it actually, I played with this little flash animation thing that you can play with and launch a planetoid in. The damn moon kills 90% of these things. It just stops them from hitting us. Not necessarily because they hit the moon, but the moon's gravitational field, and the moon just deflects a lot of stuff and spins it out in space. We wouldn't be here without this massive moon, and the moon is a fluke. So, I think that means that civilization and advanced life is a fluke of the geometry of the solar system. So I'm suddenly not surprised that we're not hearing signals from other people, because I don't think those planets have moons. They have little moons, the way Mars has moons, just captured asteroids. They're insignificant. They don't do anything. But the moon, Dave Olson just said it, the moon is our wingman. I never heard it better than that. It is. The moon is our wingman. The moon is out there keeping us afloat. And I mean that. There's a really excellent case to be made for it. So next time you're outside, folks, day or night, and you see the moon coming up over the horizon there, you think about how pretty it is, but also think that we owe our lives to that moon. Without the moon, these catastrophic impacts that just wiped wiped the slate of evolution, destroyed the dinosaurs, and all that was left were the little simple mammals. And these mass extinctions have happened at least 3 or 4 times in our history, and if instead of them having 3 or 4 times happened, imagine if they'd happened 40 times or 100 times. If an extinction level event came along every 10,000 years instead of every 200-300 million years, what would we have here? Nothing. We'd have lichens and moss and tiny little bugs. So I think we owe it to the moon. And Matt J. Harris in our comment section there brings up something that I loved, and I meant to mention, I forgot to mention it. And that was a piece of software called SETI at Home. I got this back in the early, I want to say the 90s, when I first started getting computers on the internet, mid-90s, mid to late 90s, maybe early 2000s, around in there. SETI at Home was a screensaver that you could download, and basically what it did was, when your computer wasn't working, when it was resting at night, SETI would connect to the internet, and the SETI at Home thing would take a little package of data, raw data, and it would use your CPU to crunch it. And then it would just send the data back. It's looking for the signal, did all the processing. So it's the world's first giant, massively parallel processing thing. And you would get a cool little screen display, and it's looking for the signals and little bars and all this other stuff. And I must have spent, I don't know, I bet I spent 30 hours waiting for things to render, because I had a 3D company. And I would look at this screensaver, and I'm looking for the signal because I wanted to be there when that little spike, came up. And what they would do is the way SETI at Home would work is they take the same package of information and send it out to 50 computers or 100, I don't know what the number was. And they'd all do the processing, and then they'd send it back. And if one of them showed a spike, that's probably a fluke. They'd look at the data. But if all 50 came back with a spike in the same place, then they would turn the big guns on wherever that place was. A really brilliant idea. I think SETI at Home was as good an idea as SETI looking for itself. So anyway, that deserves mention because it was a really brilliant thing. The idea of using people's, they couldn't afford massive supercomputer because they're $100 million. But they could afford this basic free download so that millions and millions of people all around the world use their Pentium computers to crack the problem. And the deal is, folks, we've been doing this for decades now, and there's no signal out there, which means that intelligent life is likely a lot rarer than we think. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. When you have the numbers you're dealing with, hundreds and hundreds and billions of stars in a galaxy and hundreds of billions of galaxies, then the mathematical chance of extraterrestrial intelligent civilized life is 100%. You know those kind of numbers, the number is 100%. It's out there. But I bet it's a lot rarer than we thought, a lot rarer, which is good, I think. I was kind of disappointed that we didn't get a chance to get the big space tap on the back, I was talking with a friend of mine the other night. We were walking out at nighttime, and I was saying, can you imagine? We sent out this, Arecibo radio telescope sent out a giant coded signal back in the 70s to the Omega Centauri star cluster, I think. And then the Voyager and the Pioneer probe. But we basically have taken everything about Earth, and we've, here's the relationship of quasars to the center of a galaxy, pinpointing our location, and here's the atomic structure of hydrogen, and these people are this many hydrogen atoms tall, and here's what a human looks like, and here's what a human female looks like, and here's what animals sound like, and here's a sound from a humpback whale, and here's a blue whale, and here's a picture of kids dancing in the streets, and all this other stuff. Send all this stuff out to the big old kind of cold call in the sky. And I thought, what if you sent this signal out and it took 50 years to reach Deneb or something and come back, and suddenly there's a spike and there's a signal and you get the signal and the response is K. You ever had a text where you launch this incredible thing and somebody comes back with it K? Like they don't even have the ability to write out okay. You send all this stuff out, you get back K. How dare you? Who do you think you are? This is our entire civilization. We are the, we're not saying we're the best in the universe by no means, but this is our entire planet, and all the people have come and died in our pyramid of standing on the shoulders of giants, and we were able to get blah, 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 blah. Send back the message. Wait another 50 years. You can't just dismiss our civilization. And 50 years more goes by, and instead of a K, the next message just says meh, with the little, poker face icon. Meh. That'll put us in our place. Great question.